good morning.
Good morning.
It's a real pleasure to be with you here. What I decided to do for this morning is really settle the issue once and for all. I will tell you what the conflict is all about and how it will come to an end. Yes. Okay. So for that I have to tell you a little bit about how I came to think about it and how I came to experience. So I grew up in Jerusalem, very relevant right now. So I grew up in humdrum, boring, west of the Armistice line, nothing holy, Jerusalem. I grew up in Beit HaKerem, your classic labor, Zionist, secular neighborhood of the era. As I'm sure you know, this was a very partisan time in Israeli politics. We did not know people who did not vote for labor. We could not imagine that decent people existed who did not vote for labor. And that is the environment that I grew up in. And into the 80s and 90s, as I grew up, I became very much part and adopted what became the central premise of the Israeli Labor Party at the time, the very famous idea of land for peace. Basically believing that the day that we hand over land acquired in the Six-Day War, we will have peace. The peace agreement with Egypt supposedly bore out that premise. We can definitely debate whether what we have with them is peace, but at the time, that seems to be what we were having and the deal we were making. Then the 90s. Well, the 90s really seemed to prove our premise. Remember the 90s, the end of the Cold War, the sense that the world was getting its act together. So finally, Madrid, the Oslo Accords, the peace agreement with Egypt, the feeling was, this is it. We're handing over land, we're getting peace, and it's all going to be over. And then came the year 2000. Ehud Barak goes to Camp David, puts forth a proposal, a bold one, some would say reckless, but certainly one that would have given the Palestinians a state of their own in the West Bank and Gaza. This is repeated again in 2008 with Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who puts forth an even bolder proposal. And yet, on both these occasions, 2000 and 2008, faced with clear, concrete, specific opportunities to have a state of their own in the West Bank and Gaza, the word yes is nowhere to be heard. And this was deeply baffling. It was baffling for me. We had a very clear premise. But it was generally baffling for Israelis. Why? Because in the Israeli understanding of history, and people who want a state say yes. It's really that simple. They don't go around writing op-eds in the New York Review of Books. They say yes. Now, why is this the Israeli Zionist understanding of history? That if people who want a state say yes? Well, because that was our history, right? When we speak of the partition proposal, 1947, we just marked 70 years. When we speak of that, we often see, what are the images we have, right? The people huddled by the radio, tallying the votes, spontaneously erupting into dancing in the streets, the headlines in the papers, a Jewish state, a Hebrew state, Medina Ivrit, joy. But think about what the proposal really meant from the perspective of the Jewish and Zionist leadership at the time. The partition proposal basically says this. Look, we, the United Nations, the heir of the League of Nations, we know that our predecessor, the League of Nations, after World War I, essentially promised you the entirety of the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, but it's not really working out. So you know what? You get half. Most of it is the Negev Desert. And by the way, we know you're called the Zionist movement, but no Zion for you guys. You're not getting Jerusalem. Jerusalem will belong to no one. Not the Jewish state, not the Arab state. And we know you're called the Jewish people, which literally in every world language except English and French is read the Judean people, right? Yehudim, Yehudi, Yahud, Judah. So you are the Judean people, but no Judea for you. The cradle of your civilization will be in the Arab state. So this is the proposal. Half of what you were promised, mostly desert, and the two biggest symbols of who you are, your namesake, Zion and Judea, are out. What do you say? Sure, we'll take it. Right? That is in one of the most remarkable moments in the history of any revolutionary movement. The Zionist leadership says yes. So in our understanding of history, a people who want a state say yes. So when the Palestinians would not say yes to two clear, distinct opportunities to have a state of their own, and we're talking recent history, 2000, 2008, not 1947, and the question was, what's going on? And not only did they not say yes, what followed was this descent into bloody mayhem that was misnamed the Second Intifada, but really was just bloody massacre. And I'm sure you remember that. Certainly for me, growing up in Israel, this was the darkest time. There was a sense that if you left your home, you were playing Russian roulette with your life. Sitting in a cafe with your friends was an act of resistance. Now, where was all this happening? Where were families, children being blown to bits? This was in Netanya, in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Beersheba. Now, where are all these places? These places, they're not settlements. They're not in the West Bank. They are supposedly in Israel that is uncontroversial, legitimate, Israel within the Green Line. And yet, this is where families were being massacred. I remember at that time wanting to find a Palestinian and saying, what is it that you want? Tell me what you want. Because if you want a state for yourself in the West Bank and Gaza, I'll fight with you shoulder to shoulder. But if you're telling me, through your actions, through your words, that more than you want a state for yourself, you still cannot stomach, cannot accept that me, my people, the Jewish people, we shall have our state here next to you. If you are telling me that this is essentially a choice between you and me, between you and us, then I choose us. And I have no moral qualms about it. You remember at the time there were these essays, The Moral Collapse of the Israeli Left. And I remember thinking, you have to be kidding. This was a moment of moral clarity. If the choice is about my own survival, then I choose it. It's what moral systems tell you to do. So as this was taking place, and I was beginning to question what is going on, and many other Israelis, I was asked to meet moderate Palestinians. I was still considered a moderate Israeli. I was becoming an active in the Labor Party. I was not yet a member of parliament, but I was already active, working with people like Yossi Beilin and Shimon Peres, supporting the two states, Palestinian statehood, so checking the boxes for an meetings, and I very quickly realized that the moderation of the Palestinians was a moderation of resignation. They told me things like, we get it, you're here, you're powerful, you stole our land, but you're here. Someone was even not so resigned. She told me, you were born here, so we will not send you away. I remember thinking, thank you very much. But then we would have those post-dinner conversations. And they told me this. They said, the Jewish people are not even a people. You're only a religion. Now, I always like to mention that I am a devout atheist. Now, as I'm sure you know, many Jews are. Judaism does not have an inherent problem with atheism, given that you do not need to profess faith to be Jewish. So I'm a Jewish atheist. Many Jews, certainly in Israel, are. The idea that Judaism is only a religion is both completely wrong and, of course, offensive to many Jews who are hereby taken out of the Jewish people. And then they said, and this thing that this is your land, it's a story you made up so that you could steal our own. And I remember thinking, well, one does not need to believe in the existence of a transcendental God. One certainly does not need to be Jewish to accept that one of the most established historical, cultural relationships between a people and a land is between the people of Israel and the land of Israel, between the people of Judea and Judea. To argue that all of that was concocted over millennia, so that at the end of the 19th century, a small group of people could come to a land to which they had zero connection and steal it from those who lived there. And I thought that was going a bit far. So they kind of put both together and they said, because you're not a people, because you're not a nation, you do not get to partake in the universal right of all peoples to self-determination. You do not have a right to govern yourselves in a state of your own. It's a right of nations and peoples, and you're not that. And certainly not here, a land to which you have no connection. I went back from these meetings and I thought, these are the moderates. And if these are the moderates, then the conflict is far deeper, more serious than what I was led to believe. That it's about borders, settlement, Palestinian statehood, occupation. I realized that we were not thinking of being moderates in the same way. I was a moderate in the sense that I recognized their right to self-determination in this land. And part of it, but very much that they have that right. I realized that they did not recognize my right to self-determination in part of the land. The only thing they recognized was my might. That they were very clear on. But they were basically telling me that the day that I no longer have might is the day that I no longer have right. So this began for me a journey to seek Palestinians of note who would recognize that the Jewish people are here by right. Not a superior right, not an exclusive right, but a right. And after years of writing about it, speaking about it, reaching out, I found one and a half remarkably courageous Palestinians who were willing to say that the Jews have a history here, they are here by right, even acknowledge that the Arabs were wrong to reject partition. But for the Palestinian to say that, he needed to be remarkably courageous. And that led me to wonder, why? I mean, I'm literally saying 5-year-old stuff, right? You have the right, we have the right, we can't both have the exclusive and superior right, so let's figure out how to share. Why was it no problem to find Israelis who would recognize the need to partition, the need to recognize the Arab-Palestinian right to self-determination? I certainly need no courage to voice these views. Why did a Palestinian notion of good and evil among groups. That the Jews are good and the Arabs are evil, or the Jews are evil and the Arabs are good. This has no explanatory power. So why was it difficult to find a Palestinian who would say something so simple? And the more I reflected on it, the more I realized we are asking the Arabs to accept a lot. Think about what we're asking them to accept. The first thing we're asking them to accept is that a people have come home after 2,000 years. Now, who does that, right? Seriously, who comes home, knocks at the door, rings the doorbell after 2,000 years and says, honey, I'm home? Who does that? Can we acknowledge that anywhere in the world, if a people came somewhere after 2,000 years saying, this is mine, that would have been a conflict-making situation anywhere. But add to that it's not just any people who are coming home after 2,000 years. It's the Jews. And why does that matter? Because by the time that the Jews are beginning the process of their return under Zionism with the idea of restoration of their sovereignty, this area has already spent about 1,000 years more being Arab, being Muslim. And in their sense of culture, history, justice, theology, the Jews were headed for the dustbin of history, right? The Jews were a relic. People who got the first part right, but not the sequels. So they can be somewhat tolerated, but as an inferior people who know their proper place in society. Certainly not equals. Now, I do a lot of work comparing the trajectories of feminism and Zionism and how similar they are. And I argue that many of the problems in world history come when a group that was for millennia considered your inferior one day has the gall, we would say chutzpah, to wake up and say, I am your equal. I am not your inferior. I refuse to accept my proper place, the role that you have assigned to me. Now, you might say, why is that a big deal? Why would it be a big deal if a previously subjugated group, one that was inferior, considered inferior, calls for equality? Why is that a big deal? Why is it not accepted? Well, I had a short political career, but enough to learn one lesson. The only important lesson of politics, and it's this. No one ever gives up power voluntarily. You want power, you have to extract it. And even once you extract it, expect those from whom you took power to fight back. Now, what is equality? What is a battle for equality? It seems so benign to a 21st century person. Of course we support equality. But when you begin to understand that equality ultimately requires a redistribution of power and resources, you begin to understand why it's not so benign. And there's a great phrase that runs around the internet. I was not able to find the specific source, but it says this. To those accustomed to privilege, equality feels a whole lot like discrimination. So the idea that a power structure that was predicated on a people knowing their place below you is suddenly challenged by people claiming equality, thereby ultimately demanding a redistribution of power and resources. Of course, this is going to be resisted at every turn. So we are asking the Arabs to accept that a people have come home after 2,000 years, that a people whose very return challenges their entire system of law, justice, theology, and society. And we're asking them to accept all that when they have the numbers and we don't. Right? When Israel declares independence, the ratio of Jews to Arabs in the region is 1 to 50, 50. So what do? We call Jews to come here, immigrate. A lot come. We make a whole lot of babies, right? Israel is the most fertile OECD country. Lo and behold, we begin the year 2018, and the ratio of Jews to Arabs in the region today is 1 to 60. 60. We have literally not made a dent in that ratio. So we are coming to the Arabs with an insane story of return after 2,000 years that challenges their entire power structure, and we're asking them to accept it when they have the numbers and we don't. When you put these three elements together, you begin to realize why Arab rejection of Zionism is entirely rational. Of course they're going to say no. Of course they're going to say, you're crazy, get out of here, what is this? Of course they're going to say, look, we know you guys, you're like the Crusaders. We threw the Crusaders out in the 11th century, we'll throw you out in the 21st century. You guys don't belong here, you're temporary. It's a crazy story. So when you understand that these are the deep issues that drive the conflict, how will it end? What is the solution? So the conflict ends in one of two ways. And this is not the one-state, two-state solution you hear about. Those are details. The conflict ends in one of two ways. They win or we win. What does it mean if they win? If they win, they throw us into the sea. They massacre us. They bring us back to being a small Jewish minority living among the Arabs, knowing their proper place. And when they win, they will tell a great story. The story that says, look, we always knew that they don't belong. We knew that they were foreigners. We knew that they were colonialists. We knew that they were temporary. So we fought, and we continued, and ultimately they're gone and the land is Arab again. How great. In this story, the Palestinians are heroes. I'm always amazed by the notion that the Palestinians are victims in a vacuum. Few people understand that in the Palestinian understanding of history and most important of the future, they are masters of a narrative at the end of which they emerge victorious. What story will they tell? They will say, look, we were the vanguard of the resistance. We always knew that these people didn't belong here. We fought. We resisted. And yes, we had to suffer numerous humiliations. We were displaced when we lost our wars. We had to live under military occupation. But whenever faced with a requirement to sign an agreement, which would mean accepting, legitimizing the idea of an equal, sovereign Jewish presence in this land, we didn't accept it. We kept fighting because we knew that one day this humiliation would be erased. And it was better to suffer the daily humiliations of living under military occupation than to accept the far greater humiliation of accepting this insanity as legitimate. So that's one scenario. They win. What is the other scenario that the conflict ends? We win. How does we win look like? Well, given the ratio of 1 to 60 we do not drive them into the sea. We do not make them disappear. We certainly do not make them be a minority. So what does we win look like? Well, we win when they understand that we belong. We win when they understand that we are not temporary, that we are not foreigners, that we are not crusaders, that we are not colonialists, that as crazy as it is, we are an indigenous people who have come home. That is our definition of victory. And when that happens, when the Arab world, when the Islamic world begins to tell a different story, not a story of our temporariness, not a story of resistance to send us away, but a story in which we belong here, we will easily make peace. We will easily figure out how to divide this land, how to share it, how to live together. Why do I know that certainly from our side we will easily take the opportunity? Very simple. We're a small people. I always say, if you want to know anything about the Jewish people, know one thing. It determines our entire mode of thinking. We are a small people, and we are keenly aware of it. So whatever delusions of temporary grandeur we might have, we are keenly aware that if the Arab world, the Islamic world, comes to us one day and says, look, we're done. We're done fighting you. We accept your crazy story. It's crazy, but we've come to accept it. Look, we've been throwing the kitchen sink at you, and you seem to really think you want to be here. You seem to really think you've come home. So you know what? Maybe you have come home. The day that the Arab world tells us, we accept you. We accept you as legitimate, as a tribe of the region, as a people who belong here, we will grab that opportunity. If we have a chance to live here, not only on the basis of our might, but truly on the basis of a recognition of our right, of course we will do it. And if the price will be to figure out how to divide and share this land, we will do it. We are a small people, and it will be a worthwhile price. So what do we do until that moment? Right now, the two scenarios are still very much possible. How do we get to the point where we win, not them? Well, two very simple elements: power and time. Power over time. We need to demonstrate that we are powerful here. Because we're a small people, because we don't have the numbers, our only way to get the other side to accept our story is to be powerful enough for them to ultimately accept it. I say that the battle for resolving the conflict is basically a race of mutual exhaustion. Who will exhaust whom first? Will they exhaust us first? Through military invasions, terrorism, diplomatic boycotts, economic boycotts, intellectual warfare? Will we one day pick up and say, enough, not worth it, we're out of here, and then they win? Or do we exhaust them into saying, look, we tried military invasions, terrorism, economic boycotts, diplomatic boycotts, intellectual warfare. They seem to be repelling everything. They seem to insist on being here. And they seem to truly be attached to that crazy story that this is their home. So maybe it is. We exhaust them by basically outliving everything they throw at us to the point that they begin to accept our story. How long? How much time? Who knows? But what I do as I listen in into things that might indicate that we're getting there. Over 120 years of Zionist history, I can chart perhaps an arc of exhaustion. They might chart their own arc of exhaustion. But I can look for signs as more and more Arabs are exiting the conflict, exhausted by the grand vision that we might be temporary. I am particularly interested in elements when you begin to see Arab and Islamic leaders tell a different story, because that's when you know that something is changing. When a Saudi leader says, look, fighting the Jews is un-Islamic. When the Saudi researcher at a think tank writes a report that says it's time for Saudi Arabia not just to cooperate with Israel against Iran, that's obvious. It's time for Saudi Arabia to clearly declare that the Jews are a tribe of the region, like all the other tribes. That their language is a language of the region, akin to us. When you hear a Kuwaiti cleric speak about the fact that since Islam takes all the scriptures, including the Bible, then Islam can very easily accept the idea that the Jews have come home. Ultimately, all theology is fiction writing, right? It's not from God. It's the stories that we humans tell. Which means that ultimately it is up to us humans to retell them. The brilliance of theologians, of religious leaders, is that they are able to reinterpret the past seamlessly and make it appear as if the new interpretation is how it was always to be. So it is for me a possibility. Some people take the idea that religion is part of the conflict to say, and therefore it will never end. I say, no. All religions are human creations, which means that humans create and recreate and retell and reinterpret them. So there is nothing to prevent Arab humans, Islamic humans, to retell a story whereby we, the Jewish people, ultimately belong. So in the meantime, it is up to us to stand firm, to be powerful, but to also send a message that we do not harbor delusions of grandeur, that we understand ultimately that we are a small people, and that given a true chance to be accepted into this region, we will share, we will divide, and we will demonstrate what we've always been willing to demonstrate from the first days of Zionism all the way to Balfour, all the way to the partition proposal, that we recognize that we are not alone here, that there is another people here, that they have the right, but we also have the right. Their right is not superior and exclusive. Our right is not superior and exclusive. We will continue to hold up that vision. We will continue to be powerful. And hopefully the scenario whereby the Arab world one day recognizes our crazy story of an indigenous people who have come home and make it part of their story is truly the day that we will have something that we can very much call peace. Thank you.